Most Fords die young. I've watched engines give up before 150,000 miles, and I've watched others hit 500,000 like they're just getting started. The difference? Habits. I'm RJ, a Ford mechanic with over 20 years of experience working on everything, from classic Rangers to the newest F-150s. I've seen Fords die young and others outlast their owners. The difference isn't luck, it's habit. Treat yours right and it can go well past 500,000 miles. Today I'm breaking down the 11 things I do that keep my Fords alive long after most have hit the junkyard. One of the absolute first habits I recommend for keeping your Ford rolling well past 500,000 miles is to change the engine oil and filter early and often. Engine oil is the lifeblood of your motor. It lubricates the parts that move fast, like cams, cranks, and pistons, reducing friction and heat. The filter catches the dirt, metal shavings, and combustion byproducts that build up. Without good oil and filter service, things grind faster, heat builds, and wear accelerates. I've seen way too many blown head gaskets, timing chain guides, or turbo failures in Fords simply because someone skipped oil changes. For example, the 3.5-liter EcoBoost in F-150s and Explorers runs hot. So if the oil is dirty or low, the timing chain tensioners fail faster. Clean oil keeps things running smoothly, while dirty oil causes components to wear out. If you want to prevent this problem, all you have to do is change the engine oil and filter often. If you tow, haul, or use your truck hard, change the oil more often. For instance, if Ford says every 7,500 miles under normal use, you might drop it to every 5,000 miles with tough duty. Also, replace the filter whenever you're changing the oil, and use the grade approved by Ford. Always check the oil level and appearance between changes. In fact, changing your oil and filter every 5,000 miles will only cost you about $80 to $150. But if you skip this and the timing chain tensioner fails on a 3.5-liter EcoBoost or a head gasket blows on a Ford V8, you could be looking at $3,000 to $5,000 in labor and parts. At number 2 is another lesson that I've seen many of my customers learn the hard way. They always skip the factory recommended service schedule. But that's just a fast track to major repair bills. If you want your Ford to work past 500,000 miles, you've got to stick to the plan. When Ford lays out a maintenance schedule, it's not just filler pages in the manual like you might think. Instead, it's a roadmap to keep your engine, cooling system, transmission, and everything in between healthy. That means regular inspections, fluid changes, and replacement of filters, belts, hoses, and spark plugs should be timed based on your Ford. Many customers ignore maintenance schedules and end up with blown head gaskets, worn-out timing chains or tensioners, overheated motors, and other heavy failures. For instance, on the 3.5-liter EcoBoost V6 or the 5.4-liter Triton V8, failing to replace filters and fluids on schedule means oil flow drops, cooling gets marginal, and the parts wear out faster. So you should track the service intervals. At each oil change, check filters, belts, hoses, and brake systems. Ford recommends multi-point inspections at key mileages. If you tow, haul, or drive under severe conditions, then go for maintenance even more. Normally, basic scheduled maintenance visits like oil changes, inspections, and filters might cost a few $100s every 10,000 to 20,000 miles. Ignoring the schedule can lead to things like an engine replacement, which can easily exceed $7,000. Over the years, I've seen too many engines and transmissions die early simply because someone skipped checking their fluids or flushing them when needed. That takes me to number 3, which is to take care of your fluid systems. This is one of the best ways to push your Ford toward 500,000 miles instead of getting major repairs. Your engine, transmission, differential, steering system, and brakes rely on specific fluids to do their jobs. The coolant keeps your engine from overheating and warping heads. Transmission fluid lubricates, cools, and moves gears smoothly, while brake fluid keeps your brakes responsive. Even the differential or axle fluid makes sure the gears inside the axle stay lubricated and protected when you're towing or turning. Models like the 5.4-liter Triton or the 6-liter Power Stroke end up with blown head gaskets because the coolant was never flushed and became acidic or clogged. On F-150s and other trucks, I've opened transmission where the fluid was dark and burnt-smelling and the gears were already slipping because the fluid lost its additives. Neglecting any of the major fluids leads to wear, heat, and corrosion. So at every oil change or major service, inspect the fluid levels and condition. Also, if you tow, haul heavy items, or drive in hot and dusty conditions, shorten the maintenance intervals. A coolant flush might cost $120 to $250, while transmission fluid service might cost between $250 and $400. But if the head gasket fails or the transmission breaks down, you're looking at $5,000 or more. Number 4 is to replace filters on schedule. With over 20 years of working on Fords, I've learned that filters might seem like small, boring parts, but skipping them can lead to big, expensive messes. If you want your Ford to make it toward 500,000 miles, you need to replace your filters regularly. Every Ford has different filters. The air filter keeps dust, debris, and contaminants out of the engine's air intake so the combustion process stays clean and efficient. Then the fuel filter prevents dirt and gunk in fuel from entering your injectors, while the oil filter traps metal shavings, soot, and other contaminants in the oil, so the lubrication system remains effective. Some of my customers ask me to repair their injection pump, not realizing that they have these issues because the filter was plugged. A clogged fuel filter can also lead to sluggish performance, fuel pump stress, or misfires. This is common on Ford models like the 5.0-liter Coyote V8 or the 3.5-liter EcoBoost. So when you replace, always use good quality filters like Ford's Motorcraft and ensure the proper seal and fit. Whenever you maintain your Ford, inspect the filters. A good test is to hold the filter up to the light, and if you can't see through it, replace it. It usually costs about $50 to get a new air filter and $30 to $80 for a fuel filter. But if you let the filters go bad, you end up with a fuel pump or injector damage, which costs over $1,000. Turbo or engine damage from air restriction costing over $2,000, or major engine wear due to contaminated oil, which will cost over $3,000 to fix. At number 5, I recommend focusing on tire maintenance, alignment, and suspension care. These can easily affect the whole vehicle's life. If you ignore them, you'll shorten your Ford's lifespan faster than skipping an oil change. Everyone knows what the tires do, but not all Ford drivers understand the importance of alignment and suspension. Alignment makes sure your wheels are pointing the right way, so if there's misalignment, you'll end up with uneven tire wear, pulling, and strain on suspension. The suspension includes the shocks, struts, control arms, and bushings, keeping the vehicle stable and absorbing any irregularities. If the suspension is worn, tires will bounce and the car becomes misaligned. Some customers have cars with perfect engines and transmissions, but the tires were shredded within 30,000 miles because alignment wasn't done. Suspension components got worn out, or tire pressures were all over the place. If you're driving and hit a pothole or curb or have worn ball joints, the alignment will shift and your tires will wear unevenly. It's a good idea to inspect tire tread regularly. Uneven wear often signals alignment or suspension problems. Also, get a wheel alignment at least once a year, or if you notice pulling or after an impact. You should get suspension components inspected at the same time and replace all the worn parts before they cause bigger damage. If you go for basic alignment, tire rotation, and pressure checks every year, it costs about $300. But if you neglect it, prematurely worn tires will need to be replaced and cost about $1,200 for a full set. Even worn-out suspension components can cost about $1,500 or more to replace. If you find this helpful, hit that like button. It helps the channel a lot. Let me tell you, your driving style can make or break whether your Ford hits 500,000 miles or dies way before that. It's not just what parts you replace and how often you maintain, but how you use your Ford. Your engine, transmission, suspension, and brakes all suffer when you're heavy-footed, tow too much without care, drive in constant stop-and-go traffic, and ignore good habits like warming up and cooling down. The habits you build will affect how hard the components work and how fast wear happens. Many Fords have come in with stripped transmissions, warped engine heads, and tired turbos, all because the owner drove hard from a cold start, ignored loads, or overworked the vehicle too often. For instance, a 3.5-liter EcoBoost V6 in a heavily used F-150 will be engulfed in heat and wear fast if you're always towing over specs or not letting it warm up and then shut down properly. So, always warm your engine up a minute or two before hard driving, especially with turbo or EcoBoost models. Avoid frequent full throttle starts and stops, and instead, use gentle acceleration when you can. When towing or hauling, don't just assume that the Ford is built for it and drive carefully. Shift early, let the transmission breathe, and avoid lugging the engine. Let the engine cool down a little before shutoff whenever you're driving with a heavy load or doing steep downhill work, so oil and cooling systems purge heat properly. And be proactive in taking care of your Ford. My number 7 tip is to always use OEM parts. If your Ford needs a new part anywhere, you should go for genuine OEM parts and not just any old part. OEM parts are always made by or approved by Ford for your exact make, model, and engine. That includes Motorcraft oil filters, genuine Ford fuel pumps, or factory service spark plugs. Many Fords have come into the shop with sudden failures, all because someone went cheap. For example, aftermarket sensors on a 3.5-liter EcoBoost didn't send correct data, causing the timing to be off and the engine to face wear and tear. Aftermarket cooling parts didn't match the flow spec in a diesel setup, leading to overheating and warped heads. So, even if the part fits, if it doesn't match the Ford specs, it can damage other parts. So when replacing a part, ask for Ford or Motorcraft parts instead of aftermarket options. And for critical systems like engine sensors, cooling systems, and transmission components, go for OEM parts. OEM parts are usually more expensive than cheaper aftermarket ones, but if the cheap part fails, the cascading damage could cost $1,000 to $3,000, with faults like engine damage from a faulty sensor and cooling failure. Aside from getting the right parts, it's easy to overlook leaks and warning lights in your Ford. That takes me to number 8. One of the biggest habits I see that separates Fords that hit 500,000 miles from the ones that die early is ignoring early warning signs. Spotting leaks, dashboard lights, and strange behavior early can save you serious money. Every major system in your Ford has fluids, gaskets, sensors, and pressure systems. They're designed to keep things in balance. That's why you should monitor oil pressure, coolant temperature, transmission temperature, and fuel delivery. The warning lights on your dashboard exist to alert you before damage happens. Fords usually end up with blown head gaskets, cracked blocks, or failed transmissions, simply because a small leak or warning light was ignored. On the 3.5-liter EcoBoost V6 in some F-150s, a hidden coolant leak or overheating due to a failing internal water pump caused major internal damage. If you notice any oil dripping under your Ford or coolant puddles, it means that the gasket or seal is failing. It can cause overheating or oil starvation. Let's not forget the check engine light. Most people ignore this light and feel like it's no big deal. But when the lights pop up, get them scanned. Make sure you inspect the Ford visually every month, address leaks early, and check the sensors and fans. My number 9 habit is to avoid overloading or towing beyond capacity. This is a habit that I've seen kill what used to be solid trucks. Don't treat your towing capacity like a suggestion because it's a limit. So if you want your Ford to rack up big miles, knowing and respecting what it can carry or tow is non-negotiable. Every Ford truck has specified numbers, like the payload, which is what you can carry in the truck bed, and towing capacity, which is what you pull behind. These ratings mean your engine, transmission, frame, suspension, brakes, cooling, and all other parts can only handle loads within those numbers. Many Fords in my shop end up with overheated transmissions, broken axles, warped frames, or ruined suspensions. This is often because someone loaded or towed too much. So, if you exceed the gross vehicle weight rating or gross combined weight rating, you overload the brakes, suspension, and engine. If you're not sure what your Ford can handle, check the sticker inside the driver door jamb. You can also check out Ford's towing calculator before hooking up your trailer to check your limits. It's best to distribute the load evenly, keeping heavier items over the axles and matching the tongue weight for trailers. You'll probably spend about $200 to $500 on buying the right hitch, cooling kit, scales, and periodic checks. But if your truck is overloaded, it can cause a failed transmission or a bent frame and cost $8,000 or more. Number 10 is one of the biggest killers of Ford engines: neglecting the cooling system and the supporting parts. Like the fans, water pumps, hoses, and thermostats, can ruin your Ford. If you want your Ford to hit 500,000 miles instead of failing early, you've got to treat the cooling system like a first-class citizen. Your Ford's cooling system and auxiliary parts work to keep your engine temperature under control. When the engine gets hot, the cooling system must pull heat out and keep oil, metal parts, and seals working inside safe limits. If the fans don't come on, or the hoses leak, or the water pumps fail, the engine parts start to overheat, and this causes the gaskets to fail and important seals to break. I've seen way too many Ford engines come into the shop with blown head gaskets because the cooling system wasn't well maintained. On the 3.5 and 3.7 liter V6 engines especially, the internal water pump is driven by the timing chain. If it fails, the coolant dumps into the crankcase and mixes with oil, which can ruin bearings or heads. And with engines like the 6.7 liter Power Stroke or 5.4 liter Triton, overheated heads warp, compression losses happen, or the entire engine will need to be replaced. Check your coolant level monthly and look for any signs of leakage under the vehicle. You also have to replace coolant when it becomes too old, as this can cause corrosion in your engine. Use the correct coolant type recommended by Ford, as using the wrong mix can corrode the system. And if you tow or load heavily, consider upgrading your radiators and fans, or auxiliary coolers. And finally, know that most Fords die early because their drivers don't adapt to how and where they drive. Your driving environment matters a lot. Your Ford's engine, transmission, cooling system, suspension, and other parts are designed with normal use in mind. So, if you live somewhere with dusty gravel roads, snow and salt, heavy loads to tow, or off-road use, your Ford is working harder than normal. When you recognize that and adjust how you maintain the car, you can prevent sudden wear and tear. Even if your Ford looks fine on paper, it can break down anyway when the driver treats it like a commuter vehicle when it really isn't. If your Ford is powered by a 3.5-liter EcoBoost, yet you tow heavy loads nonstop in hot weather and high elevation without changing your coolant more regularly, you end up with overheating, stressed turbos, and wear and tear on the timing chain. Another example is using any Ford truck in salty coastal conditions without flushing the undercarriage. It causes corrosion to get into brackets and wiring, and what could have been routine maintenance turns into big repair bills. If you don't adapt to usage, your car wears out faster. So you should identify your use case and shorten the service intervals based on that. If you tow, use dusty roads, or drive in hot weather, you should do your oil changes every 5,000 miles instead of 7,500 miles. Also, check for underbody corrosion in salted areas. Inspect dust seals and filters if you're on gravel roads. And monitor coolant and transmission temperatures if you tow heavy items a lot. The main reason why Fords die early is that the driver doesn't maintain them properly. With these habits, you can keep your Ford lasting way beyond 500,000 miles. If you want more real advice for Ford owners, make sure to subscribe and check out my next video where I share WD-40 tricks that saved my Ford customers thousands in repairs.